Oregon covers 30 million acres of forest, dense, cold, and endless. Since 1997, 240 people have officially vanished here. Hikers, hunters, tourists, locals. They walked into the trees and never came back. In February 2016, an entire town heard a sound that shouldn't exist, a metallic scream that experts still can't explain. In December 2024, 2 commercial pilots saw red lights moving over the Coast Range, in patterns no known aircraft can replicate. Air traffic control told them to avoid the objects, without saying what they were. And in September 2025, search teams returned to Crater Lake for an 8-year-old boy who vanished 19 years earlier, because new evidence suggested he might still be out there. Oregon's forests are beautiful, but they're not empty. They produce sounds that science can't trace, lights that move with intelligence, and vanishings that follow no pattern anyone can prove. People enter with GPS, radios, and survival gear, and disappear as if the woods closed behind them. These are 6 real mysteries happening right now in Oregon. 6 cases with evidence, but no answers. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, because after this video, Oregon will never look the same again. The Forest Grove Sound, the scream that physics can't explain. February 2016 to July 2025. It started on a cold February night in 2016. Around 9:30 p.m., residents along Giles Creek Road in Forest Grove, Oregon, stepped outside because the air itself seemed to be crying out. The sound was sharp, metallic, high-pitched, and alive. Some described it as a giant flute played off pitch. Others said it was like metal twisting under pressure. NBC called it a broken violin fed through a loudspeaker. But the people who were there didn't call it anything poetic. They just called it terrifying. It began without warning, echoing across the neighborhood for 10, sometimes 20 seconds at a time, before fading into silence. Then it would return, from a different direction. The sound seemed to move through the trees, circling the town, never staying long enough to be found. Within days, Forest Grove became a war zone of microphones and flashlights. The fire department checked gas lines. The police department searched for machinery, generators, sirens, anything. The Department of Forestry confirmed that their seismic and pressure sensors weren't producing it. Public Works tested every water main and electrical line. Nothing. Professor Andrew Dawes, a physicist at Pacific University, mapped every reported location. He expected to find a pattern, a triangulation point, but the dots refused to form one. Some reports overlapped. Others contradicted each other. It was as if the sound was everywhere at once, or nowhere at all. Acoustic engineer Tobin Cooley analyzed several recordings made by residents. He confirmed the tone was extremely directional, meaning it should be easy to trace to its source. "It surprises me that no one has been able to locate it," he said. "It's like sound that doesn't follow the rules of sound." For weeks, the town endured it. Some nights it came once, others a dozen times. Dogs barked and hid under beds. Windows vibrated. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Authorities closed the case. They listed the cause as undetermined mechanical origin. The world moved on, but the people who heard it didn't forget. In July 2025, journalist Chris Lidgate returned to Forest Grove to investigate what locals called the scream. To his surprise, they told him it had never really gone away. It just got smarter. Residents reported hearing the same sound sporadically through the years, always at night, always near Gales Creek Road, and always impossible to trace. One man said it felt like the forest remembering a sound it used to make. Another said he could feel it more than hear it, like a vibration inside his chest. Forest Grove's fire department still receives occasional calls about the noise, but they no longer respond. After 9 years of searching, every explanation has failed. Leaking pipes, industrial fans, broken transformers, even hoaxes. None match the sound's power or precision. Whatever it is, it defies everything we know about acoustics. It travels too far, cuts too cleanly, moves too deliberately. And maybe that's the problem. It's not the sound that's mechanical. It's what's behind it. 9 years later, the people of Forest Grove still lock their doors when it starts. They turn off the lights, wait in silence, and pray it passes. Because when the air begins to scream, you can't tell if it's a warning or a response. Forest Grove hears something that shouldn't exist. But above Oregon's mountains, pilots have seen something that shouldn't be there either. Lights moving in ways that break the laws of physics. The Oregon Lights, the UFO's air traffic control can't ignore. It began just after 9 p.m., December 7, 2024. The sky above Oregon's Coast Range was clear, moonless, cloudless, silent. Two commercial pilots flying separate aircraft west of Eugene radioed air traffic control almost at the same moment. Both reported unidentified red lights moving across the forest below them. At first, controllers assumed drones, but then the objects began to move, not like aircraft, not like anything human. They darted between altitudes in impossible arcs, accelerating from horizon to horizon in seconds, vanishing, then reappearing at new angles. In the leaked transmission, a controller's voice cuts through static. Unidentified traffic at your 1 o'clock. Maneuver around the object. That isn't standard procedure. Air traffic control doesn't acknowledge UFOs, not unless radar shows something solid. Both pilots confirmed visual contact. 3 red circular lights rotating slowly in formation. Then they shifted, as if the formation was alive, collapsing inward before streaking toward the Pacific, vanishing over Cieslaw National Forest. One of the pilots, a 20-year veteran, described the motion as not aerodynamic, but intentional, like it was choosing its path. A 44-minute video, verified by the Oregonian, records the entire exchange. Radio chatter, altitude readings, timestamps, everything. FAA flight data later confirmed the locations matched exactly. No weather anomalies, no meteor activity. When the footage leaked, the FAA responded with a single line, investigation ongoing. But December wasn't the first time. In August 2025, residents from Coos Bay to Lincoln County saw bright streaks carving the night sky, horizontal trails of fire that stopped mid-air, then vanished. No meteor showers, no rocket launches, no debris re-entry. The same month, military radar in Washington recorded unidentified targets near the Oregon border, tracked for 6 minutes before they disappeared. And in September, hikers near Garibaldi Mountains reported clusters of red lights hovering silently above the tree line, like lanterns moving against the wind. Every expert has tried to explain them. Drones, weather balloons, satellite flares, classified aircraft, but none fit. The lights move too fast, change direction too abruptly, and vanish too cleanly. One anonymous FAA official admitted to a local journalist that the incident complicated radar records. When asked to elaborate, he simply said, "It's not just pilots seeing them, it's us." Locals in the Coast Range still talk about it, the December night when the sky itself seemed to break formation. Fishermen along the coast claim the ocean glowed red for minutes afterward, as if the light had sunk into the waves. The FAA has issued no updates. The video remains under federal review, and yet sightings continue. Red lights moving in patterns that make no sense, over forests that already have too many secrets. December 7th wasn't the first time Oregon's skies were visited, and if the radar data is right, it wasn't the last. Above the forest, the lights move with intent, but deeper inside those same woods something else moves, and this one makes sound. The Willamette vocalizations, the sounds that aren't animals. Willamette National Forest is vast, nearly 1.5 million acres of deep valleys, glacial lakes and mountains heavy with fog. In the day, it's silent except for the wind and the hum of insects, but at night, something else wakes up. It started with late-night hikers and cabin owners reporting strange calls echoing through the trees, long drawn-out wails that didn't belong to any known species. The sounds began as far back as 2018, but over the years the reports grew consistent. Same time of night, same regions, same unnerving rhythm. Locals called them the Willamette voices. One Reddit user living near Blue River posted in 2023 that the noises came twice in 3 months, both around 3 in the morning. He'd lived in the same cabin for years. He knew what elk and cougars sounded like. This wasn't that. He described it as something mimicking words, almost human, but not. In 2025, a researcher investigating alleged Bigfoot activity near the same region reported hearing mouth pops, short, deliberate clicking noises, while collecting track impressions. "I was being watched," he wrote. "I could feel it. The sounds vary. Some are deep, resonant bellows that carry through the valleys. Others are rhythmic, like wood striking wood, too strong to be woodpeckers. There are also screams, distant and distorted, rising through the trees and stopping mid-note, like something realizing it's being heard." Wildlife biologists have reviewed recordings. None match bears, cougars, elk, or any other regional species. The frequencies are too low. The pacing is deliberate. One biologist wrote privately, "If this is an animal, it's one we've never classified. But it isn't just noise. There's evidence left behind." The same researcher near Blue River found a sequence of juvenile tracks, more than 100 impressions running across a muddy ridge. He cast 14 of them. The stride and pressure suggested bipedal movement, upright, human-like but smaller. Juvenile, he wrote, possibly 3 individuals traveling together. He also photographed trees bent into arches, logs stacked in triangular patterns, and limbs woven into shapes no storm could produce. "It looks like communication," he said. The incidents cluster around a few key regions: Blue River, Mount Hood, and the southern Willamette Valley. Residents report the same pattern. The sounds start after midnight, move in circles around campsites, and stop the instant someone turns on a light or calls out. By morning, the ground is disturbed, prints appear, and the forest goes silent again. No official agency has investigated. There are no wildlife reports, no recorded studies, no funding for what the state calls unverified auditory phenomena. But people keep hearing it, sometimes from deep in the forest, sometimes from the tree line right outside their homes. Hikers describe it best. It's not the volume that gets you. It's that whatever's making it wants you to hear it. Experts can't explain it. Locals have stopped trying. And those who've heard it say once you do, you never sleep the same again. Because the Willamette forest doesn't echo, it answers. And lately, when it answers, people start to vanish. Susan Lane Fournier, the hiker who disappeared with her dogs. It was just another cold morning on Mount Hood. The air was thin, the trails empty. 61-year-old Susan Lane Fournier loaded her pack, clipped leashes to her 2 dogs, and set out along the Salmon Huckleberry Wilderness Trail, a route she'd hiked dozens of times before. She texted her husband at 9:12 a.m., a photo of the dogs beside a moss-covered ridge. It was the last message she ever sent. By nightfall, she hadn't returned. Her husband reported her missing at 8:47 p.m. Within hours, Clackamas County Search and Rescue mobilized. Helicopters swept the ridges with infrared cameras. Drones flew grid patterns over the wilderness. Volunteers scoured every mile of trail on foot. The dogs, trained for scent recovery, found nothing. For 4 days, the search continued. Not a footprint, not a torn piece of fabric, not even the echo of a bark. On November 27th, the search was officially suspended. All reasonable areas exhausted. But that explanation made no sense to the people who knew her. Susan was an experienced outdoorswoman. She logged her routes, carried satellite beacons, and was known to double-check every safety measure. Her friends described her as meticulous to a fault. And then there were the dogs, her constant hiking partners. They were large, trained, and familiar with the terrain. Dogs don't vanish. They leave paw prints. They get lost, bark for hours, return to familiar spots. But the wilderness was silent. Reporters called it the most confounding disappearance in Mount Hood's history. The sheriff's office released a statement. No evidence of foul play, animal attack, or environmental hazard, and yet the details don't add up. Her car was found neatly parked at the trailhead, locked, keys missing. Searchers noted that the passenger seat was reclined, as if someone else had been sitting there. The GPS beacon she always carried was not in her pack, nor in her home. The signal never activated. Witnesses reported hearing barking in the distance on the first night, faint, somewhere above the canyon. Teams were sent. Nothing was found. The sound stopped as abruptly as it began. By the second night, rescuers reported something stranger: radio interference, static that rose and fell like a heartbeat, always around the same frequency. They switched channels. The distortion followed. And then silence. Susan's case is one of 240 official disappearances in Oregon's forests since 1997. Hikers, campers, locals, many of them seasoned outdoorsmen who knew the terrain. None of them found. Officials insist there's no connection between the cases, no shared geography, no common factor. But maps of the disappearances form a pattern, concentric circles around Mount Hood's wilderness, all within a radius of 40 miles. The last image Susan posted online, the dog standing beside that mossy ridge, was later analyzed by volunteers. They noticed something strange, a faint shape behind the trees. Upright, narrow, blurred as if moving. Authorities dismissed it as lens distortion. But for those who've hiked the same trails, the photo feels like something else, like she wasn't alone when she took it. To this day, no trace of Susan or her dogs has been found. The file remains open, the trail silent. Susan vanished where hundreds of others have before her, and where one man disappeared 12 years earlier, leaving behind only his camera and a question that still echoes through the trees. Ronald M, the photographer who never came down. The ridge above Russell Lake is quiet, a place where wind moves through the pines like breath, and sound vanishes before it can echo. On August 9, 2012, 52-year-old photographer Ronald M stood there with his camera, telling his friends he'd stay a while to get some shots before heading down. They left him at the overlook. He never followed. Ron was no amateur hiker. He knew Oregon's wilderness like a map he'd memorized. His backpack was heavy with gear, a tent, sleeping bag, food for 4 days, medication, and spare batteries. He planned to camp, shoot, and return by the weekend. By nightfall, when he hadn't arrived at camp, his friends retraced their steps. The ridge was empty. No camera, no pack, no footprints, just stillness. They called for help. The search should have been immediate, but it wasn't. 3 agencies became involved: Lane County, Klamath County, and Willamette National Forest. Each claimed partial jurisdiction. Each waited for the other to lead. By the time teams mobilized, nearly 24 hours had passed, and when they finally searched, it lasted less than 4 hours. 4 hours to sweep one of the largest wilderness regions in the Pacific Northwest. No helicopters, no cadaver dogs, no grid mapping. Then the effort stopped. Authorities called it logistically limited. Family members called it something else: neglect. Ron's daughter, Krista Dolby, later told reporters they didn't even test his car. His wallet and paycheck were sitting on the front seat. They just towed it home like it was an abandoned vehicle. A hiker claimed to have seen vomit near Ron's parked car. It was never collected or analyzed. His medical condition required daily medication. Missing a dose could cause disorientation. But no search team checked pharmacies. No one traced his last purchase. The file closed quietly, without a conclusion. Every few years, someone claims to see flashes of color on that same ridge, a glint of red and blue that disappears before you can reach it. Volunteers who returned in 2018 found a single rusted carabiner wedged in basalt 30 yards from the cliff. No corrosion pattern suggested 12 years of weather. It looked newer. Locals began calling the ridge Ohm's Edge. They say the air feels heavier there, like static before a storm. Some hikers refuse to stop at the overlook, saying it feels like being looked back at. But the strangest part came years later. In 2023, a wildfire swept through part of the Mount Jefferson wilderness. When it cleared, drone imagery revealed something unexpected: a narrow footpath carved cleanly into the ridge where Ron disappeared. It wasn't part of any trail map, old or new. When rescue teams hiked there, the path ended abruptly at a vertical drop overlooking Russell Lake. Embedded in the rock at the edge was a single tripod leg. The rest of the equipment, and Ron, were never found. His daughter still visits the ridge every August 9th. She leaves her father's photographs there, of lakes, ridges and skies he never got to show anyone. Ron M didn't fall, he didn't get lost. Something stopped him from coming down that ridge, and what happened to him wasn't the last disappearance tied to Oregon's wilderness, because 4 years before Ron vanished, a child went missing at Crater Lake, and search teams are still looking for him 19 years later. Sammy Burhulka, the 8-year-old who vanished at Crater Lake. The afternoon was bright, cold and clear, the kind of fall day that makes Crater Lake look like glass, blue so deep it swallows light. 8-year-old Sammy Burhulka stood at the edge of that view, holding his father's hand, laughing about how small the cars looked from the Rim Village overlook. At 1:30 p.m. he let go. He ran ahead up a small rise near Cleetwood Cove Trail, 50 feet, maybe 60, and disappeared over the hill. His father called out. No answer. He followed the trail, expecting to find him crouched behind a rock or tree, but Sammy was gone. Search teams arrived within hours. Rangers, local police, and volunteers from neighboring counties combed the crater's rim. Helicopters circled the lake. Divers explored its surface, though it drops nearly 2,000 feet, too deep for full exploration. For a week, hundreds of people searched. They found nothing. No footprints, no clothing, no scent trail. The forest swallowed him whole. Sammy had mild Asperger's syndrome, highly intelligent, easily distracted, sometimes anxious around strangers. His father said he was curious, fascinated by nature, but easily overwhelmed. The theory was that he'd wandered too far and hidden, but a child can't hide from heat-seeking drones, from dogs that can track scent across water and stone. After 8 days, the search was suspended. Officials called it a tragic disappearance in rugged terrain, but locals called it something else, the beginning of the Crater Lake curse. Because Sammy wasn't the first. Crater Lake has a history of vanishings. In the 1970s, 2 hikers went missing near Wizard Island, never found. In the 1990s, rangers reported campers waking in the night to see blue lights floating above the lake. In 2007, a decomposed body surfaced near Cleetwood Cove. It had been missing for years, and no one could explain how it stayed preserved in the lake's freezing depths. But what brought search teams back 19 years later was something different. In September 2025, Oregon and California agencies quietly reopened the Burhulka case. Officially, it was called a renewed search effort. Unofficially, it was something stranger. Teams focused not near the original trail, but miles east, near a section of forest previously marked unstable terrain. No new evidence was announced, but the park's statement used a word that caught everyone's attention. Hopeful. Not recover, not closure, hopeful. Closure. As if they believed Sammy might still be alive. Witnesses camping near Crater Lake in recent years describe hearing laughter echoing through the trees. A child's voice, soft, far away. Some hikers say they've seen small footprints in fresh snow, leading toward the lake and stopping abruptly at the shore. Local rangers refused to discuss the case, but one retired officer admitted, "Every few years we get reports of a kid matching his description near the tree line, always alone, always gone when someone calls out." The forest around Crater Lake has changed little in 19 years. The same trees, the same wind, the same silence where a boy's voice used to be. Sammy Burhulka ran into the woods on October 6, 2006. Searchers have come and gone. Seasons have passed, but the file remains open, not as a cold case, but as something suspended, unfinished. And every autumn, when the air grows thin and the leaves begin to fall, rangers still find small prints in the dust along the rim. Too small for a man, too fresh for 19 years gone. Because in Oregon's forests, some disappearances don't end, they wait. 6 mysteries, 1 forest. A scream that physics can't explain still echoes through Forest Grove. Red lights move above the mountains faster than aircraft can follow. Voices in Willamette whisper like the woods themselves are alive. Susan and her dogs vanished into silence. A photographer never came down from his ridge. And 19 years later, search teams still look for a boy at Crater Lake because they believe he's not gone just elsewhere. 240 people have disappeared in Oregon's forests. Comment which story stayed with you and which trail you'd never walk alone because the trees remember.